Okay. Well, without any further ado, thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to kick off now. This is our second LinkedIn Live series, and we are going to take a dive into the issues highlighted in our 2023 Hopes and Fears survey. I'm Sarah Moore. I'm Head of Workforce at PwC UK. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. If you prefer to use captions, you can tap the 3 dots at the top of this live room and turn them on. Now, the PwC Hopes and Fears survey is about all of us, essentially what's on our minds as workers, what we are thinking right now about our place and our future in the workforce. I love Hopes and Fears. It's one of our most valuable surveys, particularly for employers, because understanding what the workforce is thinking, feeling and about to do is vital. An employer who knows the difference between an engaged workforce and a disconnected workforce is the one that will deliver real growth for UK PwC. And this year's Hopes and Fears survey of 54,000 people across 46 countries, over 2,000 in the UK, has revealed some issues which might be quite surprising and concerning. But it also reveals a lot about how organisations should start planning for the near and the longer term. One of the themes central to the report was AI and skills. No surprise there. We're living through an era of extraordinary change where technologies like AI are becoming more powerful and intuitive. And what's the impact of AI on the workforce? And crucially, what does the workforce think of AI? Are they hopeful or are they fearful? And how is all of this impacting the skills agenda? If you want to know the answer to all of those questions, then you're totally in the right place. So we've got loads to talk about in the next 30 minutes. So first things first, I want to introduce our fantastic guests, and I'm going to start with Alastair Woods.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Alastair. I'm a partner in our workforce transformation practice. I do a lot of workforce strategy, which of course AI is one of the big impacts.
Thank you, Alastair. Welcome. Prasun.
Hi, everyone. I'm Prasun, partner in the UK firm. I lead our emerging technologies for our workforce consulting practice.
Welcome, Prasun. And Clare.
Hi there. I'm a director in workforce and HR transformation. I spend my days helping clients across industries affect change through people. And what bigger change than the disruption for AI right now?
Yeah, you are fantastically busy at the moment, aren't you, Clare? And it is wonderful to have you with us all the way from Singapore, which is very exciting. So let's get into it. Big question, first of all, which I'm going to pass to you, Alastair. Where are businesses at with generative AI?
Well, I think it's fair to say the penny has dropped this year for organisations. I think there's a realisation this isn't one of those revolutions, but it is a revolution. But it's not an on-off one. Not happening overnight. It is going to be quite a journey that's going to shape this decade in terms of the world of work. So most of my clients are at the early stages of planning foundational work. I think Prasun, one of our clients said they're at in the foothills. That seems to be the sort of the theme. But it's going to ramp up. They're preparing the way while trying to manage the risks and the governance and the guardrails, because obviously there are risks that come with it. From a sector lens, Sarah, I think certain areas, particularly around knowledge workers, white collar workers, are probably slightly ahead because they can see the impact. Contrary to the popular belief that AI will take more junior jobs, actually it's across the patch. So pharmaceuticals, the big area. Banking seems to be doing a lot of pre-work. In terms of what people are doing, I think across my clients, many are creating working groups, right? Empowering junior workers to try things, experiment. I think Clare will expand on that in a bit moment. But what we're doing at PwC, we've got our own tools in house, and I've noticed almost democratically some of the individuals just are using, when a question comes up like what's the tax rate in this country or what can you self-disclose around protected characteristics, they're running in parallel. Here's how we do it normally. Here's how we do it through AI. How do the answers compare? And actually finding some quite interesting stuff, right? It's advancing it. It's actually making people more productive. So another of my clients is running parallel teams deliberately to see what the findings are, to then shape policy planning for the future.
I love that. It's a real voyage of discovery, isn't it? And so that kind of co-creation and the parallel running and what does it turn up, and it's experiential learning at its best, right? It's really live. Yeah. And I really love that point around it's all demographic of workers. So it isn't just for the, let's say, the younger ones or the newer generation of people coming through into the workforce. It's for everyone. And I guess that feels quite overwhelming. There's so much opportunity impacting so many. And then you're at the first step and you're back in the foothills of that mountain. So if that's where the employers are, where do you think the employees are?
So interesting. So we asked this question about, what's your views of AI in the hopes and fears survey that you referred to at the top. And it's, I suppose, in the short answer is it's a frenemy, to use Gen Z speak, because actually there's different camps emerging. There's those individuals who actually don't see it changing their world at all. There are those who actually have a more negative perception, probably a third, depending on what sector you're in, actually what demographic you're in, who are more negative, actually think it's fearful of it, taking jobs. And there's another group, probably another third, who are actually positive, seeing it, advancing productivity, releasing capacity, all that good stuff. And I think everyone's right. It's a bit of everything. What I have noticed, because the Gen AI ramp up happened at the beginning of the year, over the course of summer, there've been quite a few studies about what it could mean. And just to pick out a couple, Sarah, one is there's a study in the USA around freelancers, particularly in graphic design and copywriting. And this is where it has had a big impact, right? It has reduced demand massively for those gig workers, and actually it's reduced price. So that's an area, a particular job, which will change. But what's going to happen is those individuals will pivot into new areas augmented by AI. It's also found that those parallel teams I've talked about, some of those studies, I think the answer was they were 25% faster, those teams that used AI versus those that didn't, and 40% the outcomes were 40% better. So there's a world, Sarah, where you could ask me to make a slide pack, which I do brilliantly,
frequently,
and ask Claire to make a slide deck using AI. And based on the studies I've seen, though, that deck will be 40% better and 25% faster from Claire, because it's an extension of ourselves. I think Prasun will talk about Copilot. It's definitely something we'll use in parallel, but it needs the human overlay.
I completely agree. Human-led, tech-enabled, and that's it right there. I love that example about the copywriters, because you're right, it might change the way they're working in the future, but the fact that the parallel teaming and working is going on, they can see live how it is impacting and how it might change. And I do know that Prasun will come on and talk about that. Love the frenemy analogy, and of course you have to keep your frenemies close, don't you? So that's what we're doing here. I can see there's tons of opportunity, and I want to bring Clare in here. And I'd like to ask you, Clare, in your experience and your observations and your research, how best do organisations bring people with them, and what are the building blocks of success?
Thanks, Sarah. So first, I will say AI or no AI. I'm very good at slide packs as well. But great question there. So for me, it starts with making the right connections. So we know that there is a disconnect between the expectations of leaders and employees in this space. And Alistair's already spoken about employees being somewhat less convinced, or there's definitely a mix going on there, whereas leaders really do see big potential, at least they profess to, in that area. Whether they know quite what that looks like is part of the journey, right? But I think really in terms of building blocks, to start with, there's something around that leadership communication. So are leaders being really transparent with their hopes of what AI will bring to their organizations? And are they really inspiring the curiosity that we know is needed from workers in order to embrace this as an opportunity? And then it comes to kind of really making it real for employees. And for me, that's more down at the team level. So how can individuals in teams put AI to use in their roles? And I think, how teams exchange around this and how team managers kind of facilitate that is going to be really critical. And a final point, just on some of those early building blocks, is really removing some of the barriers. So we know that there is a lot of apprehension whenever you kind of try something new, like it's human nature. No one wants to mess it up, right? And I think something quite simple, like having a set of do's and don'ts, can be really liberating for people as they try and experiment, as we know that they need to.
Yeah, I mean, some really, really lovely points there around communication and connection and removing the barriers. Can you bring it to life with an example for me, Claire?
Sure. So I think I'll actually default to me as an employee to start with, because I think what we've set up as the PwC UK kind of Gen AI hub is a great example of this. In there, you've obviously got some clear business rules, as we will always have, but there's also on this hub, which is open and access to everybody across the organisation, there's a lot of explanatory content, and there are some top tips and those kind of critical do's and don'ts that I've mentioned. But all of that is delivered with a narrative that really encourages experimentation in a responsible way. So in that way, it's kind of setting the expectation and then laying a bit of a foundation around how we as an organisation and how us as individuals within it can approach this new opportunity.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, look, bringing it to life personally, I think is so powerful, because we've all got our own experiences of how we're starting to grapple with it and where we're seeing it come to life. And I think leaning into it, back to Alastair's point about, frenemies and it's a hope and a fear, I think the fact that, if we can just kind of lean into it and understand the impact and what it really means for us is important. And I'm really hearing throughout, your observations, it's important to get the foundations in place, but that isn't enough to drive the change. So who's setting that?
I mean, quite right. So I think there is that foundational level of awareness, but then you've really got to light the sparks to encourage the right level of adoption. And for me, there's a couple of things there. So it's how are you empowering people? So there will be some real AI cheerleaders within your ranks. And how do you ignite, if you like, those Gen AI whiz kids to really have an impact? And that might be, empowering them to run incubators, to iterate some use cases, or it might be in how that they step forward to support their peers in this area of unknown through kind of show and tell, or surgeries, we sometimes call it, to help to demystify AI. Because really what you want to get to is a point where all people, as Alastair mentioned up top, it's also not just about those digital natives, so everyone across the workforce, they really see Gen AI as an asset that's there to enhance them and their personal performance. And you need people to experiment and feel safe to do so. People will make some small failures along the way, it's inevitable, but that's really how we learn. So critically, we need to build that momentum and make it real. The key is to understand how to do this in your own organisation, because it will be different in each. And Prasun, I think that links to some of our work on personas.
Yeah, Claire, certainly it does. And the way we are seeing it, it is not a one-size-fits-all world. It is based on the industry, the nature of the workforce, the organization culture, and individual mindsets. And when you bring all of that together, we're beginning to see the emergence of what I'm sort of loosely calling various AI archetypes and personas. And how we bring these different archetypes along the journey will actually determine how well enterprises adopt AI. We are ourselves doing a lot of interesting work in this space with our clients and some of our technology alliance partners, specifically around how we can leverage data to unpack these personas.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point there, Prasun. Can you make it real for people? Where are you seeing AI taking effect, and how are companies doing things differently?
So I guess going back to the start, Sarah, as Alastair talked about, so some of our clients are at the foothills, some are, and they are at various stages of adoption. Very early stages of the journey, trying to work out what it means for them, their workforce, and how do they actually get onto that journey in itself. Whereas there are others who are more advanced, experimenting with use cases. Either way, I think one thing's for certain, everyone knows that they need to undertake this journey and are trying to work out how they embrace it in a way that is the right answer for their own business and their workforce. Yeah,
that is so important. What are some of the use cases that we're seeing?
Lots of these. So I don't even know where to start. But if I take the HR function as an example, there's a range of use cases we're seeing across the entire hire to retire life cycle. And some of these range from very, very simple tasks which drive and unlock process efficiency to some that are augmenting service delivery by reducing friction in the overall delivery model. And I'll give you a couple of examples to bring these to life. So a very simple and repetitive task that needs consistency. So for example, comparing job adverts and aligning them for consistency of language or policy. Or how do you handle first resolution queries inside a shared service center? There's another very interesting one which we are working on internally within PwC is looking at if you think about making a change in a policy, then what would that impact of that policy be on the wider workforce if there is a way that we could ascertain that before actually making that change? And this is where large language models and the power of these are really, really helpful.
Yeah, I love this. So having spent 15 years in the function, grassroots up, just listening to some of these changes, if I think about all that paper that I used to deal with, it's really quite incredible. So really exciting times ahead for the HR function. What else do we expect to change, Prasun?
I think the function will undergo some changes for sure, like with any other function or the broader enterprises. It is an exponential impact. But I guess once it's true that the nature and skills needed will be different in some shape or form and will evolve over time, what is certain for sure is we will need the collective, what I sort of call the corpus of knowledge that sits within the function inside an organization. And that is not just true for HR, but pretty much any function that we look at. We would need that knowledge at the table to design this and build this as we go on this journey. So think of Gen AI really as a massive brain that knows everything that is to be known, in this case about HR, but more importantly, the HR inside of your own organization. And this last bit to me is the most critical one. It's that tacit knowledge that can only come from within that organization. And it is that tacit knowledge which makes a big difference in how you build for sustainable competitive advantage. And we tend to call this sort of expertise in the loop. And in my view, we will see the emergence of a new class of actors, if I can call them, in the operating model. And I call them sort of very loosely a class of cognitive HR digital concierge that will sit very, very tightly coupled with the future HR operating model.
I mean, there is so much that I love in there, but the thing that really leaps out at me is this massive brain. But what I like is the tacit knowledge, because that's the brain is the hope, because I can absolutely see how that can make organisations stronger, take that friction out, make things better for employees and workers. But it's the tacit knowledge of the organisation, and that's what takes the fear away, because it has to be relevant and it has to have that human intervention in there to take that data and apply it appropriately within the organisation. So I really, really love that. And now, AI, we're all grappling with it. We're all upskilling ourselves. Clare, I want to bring you in here and start to focus on that angle. There's a lot to learn here. There's a lot of different ways of working. Do organisations have the skills they need to be AI ready?
Yeah, great question. And I love that point as well, that the power kind of comes from within the organisation. And that's where, a lot of this focus needs to be on how do you empower and lift up people within your organisation to kind of rise to the new challenge and take these new opportunities. But you're right, there is a skills mismatch, and a balance of human and digital skills is important here. And these mismatches might not exactly be where you expect them to be. So we're seeing a lot of clients at the moment putting effort into understanding this. So running skills diagnostics or revisiting their workforce planning in order to map out the current and future skills with some scenario testing. And, Prasun's already spoken about the HR function, but the HR capability within an organisation has a big role to play there as well. And in general, in terms of those skills mismatches, I think there are probably two broad dimensions. So I think at that macro level, there's a general mindset shift and upskilling within that for the workforce. with more of an emphasis on human skills that are all important. We saw in the survey that employees ranked human skills such as adaptability, critical thinking and collaboration as much more important to their future careers than technical skills such as maybe analytics or digital skills. So that's at that broader kind of organisational level for everyone to grapple with. But there's also something at more of a targeted level. There's going to be some specific skills transitions that we need to support people through, in particular areas of the business, and understanding which roles will evolve significantly, and mapping out the skills changes in those areas will help individuals to adapt. We need to go through an exercise to understand the skills gaps and to address those in the right way.
Yeah, that's really critical, isn't it? Skills gap analysis and future roles and how we tackle that. Alastair, I want to bring you in here. You've been unusually quiet.
Yeah.
You're doing quite a bit of work with clients around this very topic, aren't you?
Yeah, I think organisations are trying to work through what's our future demand going to look like in an AI tech-driven world, the way the world's changing. I've got one example to share with you. I've got a project we're calling the 10-20 project. So the client is looking at 10 years out and focusing on 20 jobs. I think sometimes something's too big, so where do you start? So if they take it's a hospitality and leisure company, right? So they're taking 20 jobs, which includes drivers, includes waiters, baristas, all those different roles, and working through what might that job look like, or what that might activity look like, and breaking it down to those core skills. And then you get into, right, well, actually, it's going to look quite fundamentally. There's much more emphasis on customer experience, and therefore, what are the skills corridors and the skills transition you need. So I would, I think there's something here about thinking about your labour map now and your labour map of the future, and then you can start to plan what's our hiring strategy, what's our training programs, for example, how do we interact with apprenticeships, all those different things can start to surface. A lot of work for HR, so I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, it were ever thus, wasn't it, for the HR professional? Look, Prasun, I think Alastair's made some really good points there. And I'm conscious we're coming a little bit close to time. So can you just give me some headlines around how we might start doing that?
I think it's, I'll distill it down to sort of 3 steps. First, the most obvious, just start on that journey. But I know there's going to be concerns. How do we start that journey? So the area that I think most helpful is to identify something where you think that there's value that is locked. Then go after that trapped value so you can release it, either by delivering part or whole of a task faster or freeing up capacity from doing repetitive tasks. And the third most important thing is when you're doing this, and when this is really early stages of that journey, when you're experimenting with the use cases, pick a pain point that does not necessarily need currently human touch, and one that can be embedded to augment the work that human beings do better. So, for example, there are loads of use cases in the areas of onboarding or even comp rounds that can be picked as early candidates. But I guess the last message I would have on this is just whatever you do, start the journey. Don't hesitate to experiment. And as Claire talked about earlier, with the right guardrails, learn from the experiments and then make the changes.
Yeah, look, I think that's really good advice. And I'm going to get you to give one more sage bit of advice from all 3 of you, actually. And $1 million question. What's the most important thing that you think organisations and employees should be thinking about in response to AI? And Prasun, you've got the floor.
Well, like I said, it's important to start the journey and identify areas where there is trapped value that can be unlocked quickly. Starting on that journey is critical, albeit with the right guardrails, and having those guardrails in place is super critical.
Thank you. Alastair, what about you?
So I think it's all about skills, Sarah. So place a bet on the skills you'll need for that future labour map I was talking about, and plan around that.
Thank you, Alastair. Short and sweet. Claire, last but not least.
I'll go really short and sweet. I'd say remove the fear, encourage curiosity, and work together to fathom this out.
Oh, now, if we could solve so many problems, couldn't we, if we all had that approach? I completely agree. Thank you all. It has been so good to talk about AI and how it can unlock culture, skills and value, and also to hear the views through hopes and fears of how employees feel, particularly with that multi-generational lens. And I'm really gratified to hear all of the reassurances that we're at the start of the journey, but let's not procrastinate. Let's, get stuck in. Thanks so much for talking about the report in a little bit more detail. If any of you are interested in hearing more, and we've got a lot of really insightful content in there, it's available now on the PwC UK website or in the comments section of this LinkedIn Live. We'd love to hear from you, our audience. So if you'd like to connect with any of us to discuss this more, please do send a request through LinkedIn in the usual way. Thanks for listening and have a great day.